thought today it would be nice to talk about Who Am I, Bhagavan's text. And in case any of you don't know the full story behind it, I'll just say very briefly. In about 1901 or 1902, Shiv Prakash Pillai came to Bhagavan, and at that time Bhagavan was mostly keeping quiet. He was talking a little, but not much. So most of the answers that Bhagavan gave to his questions, he wrote either on the slate or on the sand. And Shiv Prakash Pillai noted down his answers. And the first question he asked Bhagavan was, "Who am I?" Which was by providence, because that was the very purpose of Bhagavan's appearance in this world, was to teach this path of self-inquiry. So he asked, "Who am I?" And Bhagavan simply answered, "Arive Nāṇ," which means knowledge or consciousness alone is I. And then the next question was, which Shiv Prakash Pillai asked was, what is the nature of Arivu, the knowledge that you say is I? And Bhagavan replied, "Arivin Sarupam Satchidanandam." The nature of that knowledge is Satchidananda, being consciousness bliss. And then over succeeding days or weeks or months, Shiv Prakash Pillai asked many other questions, and he noted down the answers. And about 20 years later, from his notebooks we can see he had compiled various drafts of the answers. And in 1923, I think it was, a biography of Bhagavan that he had written in the Tamil verse was published. And in that there was a small excerpt of what Bhagavan had taught him at that time. And he also gave a small appendix at the end, giving 13 of the questions and answers. And that immediately kindled interest among devotees. So they asked him if there's more things that he had recorded. So then a small book was published with 32 questions and answers. And that was in about 1924 or so. And within a year or so, that became so popular. Bhagavan himself rewrote the whole thing in the form of an essay. It's not known exactly what prompted Bhagavan to do that, but it is the essay form was written by Bhagavan himself. He added an initial first paragraph, which wasn't part of the answers he gave, and while organizing the rest of the answers into the form of into the form of a connected exposition, he rewrote many of the sentences. So it's an entirely fresh work written by Bhagavan himself, based on the answers that he had given to Shiv Prakash Pillai. There's a lot in this. Though it's quite a small work and appears quite simple to read, there's actually a huge amount of substance in it. It would be possible to go on expanding, to write many volumes about all the meaning that is in these mostly very simple sentences. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So what I'll do today, I'll just go through it. I thought at first of just concentrating on the portions that are dealing specifically with the practice of self-inquiry, but there's so much in it that's relevant and of interest. It's difficult to separate out the portions which are directly connected with the practice and other supplementary material, which it all is. So I'll begin from the beginning. The first paragraph is what Bhagavan himself wrote. It is basically a condensation of a long sentence he wrote at the beginning of his introduction to his Tamil translation of Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi. So in this version, what he he gives several reasons why it's necessary to investigate who we are. The first reason he gives is Sakala Jivagalom Dukkamen Vadindri Epodum Sukhamayiraka Virapadalam. That is, because all living beings want to be happy always without any misery. Yabukum Tanidetilee Parama Priyam Irapadalam. Because in everyone there's everyone has supreme love only for themselves. Priyatiku Sukhamai Karanam Adlalam. Okay. Then so he said, because everyone has supreme love for himself, and then he said, Priyatiku Sukhamai Karanam Adlalam. Because the happiness alone is the cause of love. That is, we all have love for ourselves, and because happiness alone is the cause of love, we only love the things which we think are going to make us happy. Therefore, because we have love for ourselves, that shows that happiness is our real nature. So then he goes on to say, Manamatra Nidrail Tan Dinam and Nubhavikam Tan Subhavamana Achukate Adeya, in order to attain that happiness, which is our own nature, our own essential real nature, which we experience daily in deep sleep, which is devoid of the mind, Tanne Tan Arido Venjo. It is necessary for one to know oneself. It is, yes, or knowing knowing oneself is necessary. And then he says in the last sentence, he says, Adaku Nāṇ Yār Mukhya Sadhanam. For that, Jnana-vichara, that's investigation of consciousness, in the form, who am I, alone is the principal means. So there he summarized the whole basis of why we should, why it's necessary to investigate and find out who we really are. As I say, please feel free to interrupt if you want to at any time. The next paragraph is actually mostly not written by Bhagavan, or not the original words of Bhagavan. This was what Shiv Kashan Pillai added in his notes for his own clarification. It's basically, it's fairly traditional Vedanta philosophy, saying the gross body is not I, the sense organs are not I, the organs of action are not I, the five winds, that's the five metabolic forces, beginning with the breath, are not I, and the ignorance or absence of all dualistic knowledge, which we experience in sleep, which is combined only with Vishaya vasanas, or dispositions, or tendencies, or desires for external sense enjoyments. So that ignorance is experienced when all sense perception and actions have been severed, as in deep sleep. That also is not I. So he eliminates all the things which are not I. So basically, the body is not I, the mind is not I, the senses are not I, the life in the body is not I. Even what remains in sleep, the ignorance or seeming ignorance that remains in sleep, with just the mind in its latent form of Vishaya vasanas, even that is not I. And then to connect that with Bhagavan's own answer, which is Arive Nāṇ, Shiv Kashan Pillai says, having disowned or negated all that is mentioned above, the knowledge that remains alone, that is I. And then Bhagavan's answer to his second question, the nature of this knowledge is Satchidananda, being consciousness bliss. And then we come to the substance of what Bhagavan said. First he says, if the mind, which is the cause of all dualistic knowledge and all activity, subsides, the perception of the world will cease. Just as knowledge of the rope, which is the base, will not arise unless knowledge of the imaginary snake ceases, true knowledge of self, that Swarupa Darshana, which is the base, will not, the base that is the underlying base of all this world appearance, will not arise unless perception of the world, which is an imagination, ceases. So there he gives the analogy of the snake. Just like the imaginary snake, we see a rope, we mistake it to be a snake. We see a rope and mistake it to be a snake. But the world is like the snake. It's just an imaginary superimposition. It doesn't really exist. All that exists is the rope. That rope is self. So in order to see the rope, we have to remove the illusion that it's a snake. So also to experience ourselves, we have to remove the illusion of this world. Because what we are seeing as the world is actually nothing but our own self. But however much we scrutinize the things outside, we'll never experience ourselves. We have to turn away from all these things because they're a false appearance, to know the essence of everything which is within us, which is the I. Once we experience the true nature of the I within us, everything becomes that. In other words, everything disappears and that alone remains. Then in the next paragraph he begins to deal with what is the cause of all our problems, which is this thing we call mind. And he says, what is called mind is a wonderful power that exists in Atma-swarupa, that's in our essential self. It projects all thoughts. When one removes all thoughts and sees, there's no such thing as mind remaining remaining on its own. That is, other than thoughts, there's no such thing as mind, is what he's saying. So if we set aside all thoughts and see what remains, that is, there's no such thing as mind. All that remains is I, which is our real self. Therefore, thought alone is the nature of the mind, the basic nature of the mind. Except thoughts, there is separately no such thing as a world. That is, all that we imagine that there's a world outside, but we're seeing it through our eyes, hearing it through our ears, etc. But actually, all that we are experiencing is only a series of mental impressions. Those mental impressions, Bhagavan says, they're only thoughts. There's no such thing as a world other than our own thoughts. This, for many people, is quite a difficult thing to digest. It's something philosophers have talked about for ages. How do we know that there's any world existing independent of the mind? Philosophers in all cultures have been questioning this, but philosophy can't give any answers because philosophy can't take us beyond the mind. But Bhagavan shows us a way to go beyond the mind, and Bhagavan says these things as these are all to help us in the path, to help us free our mind from attachment to external things. But Bhagavan doesn't say believe these things. In fact, he says believing all these things is useless because it's the mind that believes things. The mind disappears in sleep, it disappears in death. The mind itself is a transient thing. So any belief that the mind has is of no substantial value. The only benefit in at least tentatively believing what Bhagavan has told us here is that we can then use that tentative belief to direct our attention in the way Bhagavan told us to direct it, which is to know ourselves. That's the whole purpose of all this philosophy. So he said, except thoughts, there is separately no such thing as world. In sleep there are no thoughts, and consequently there is no world. In waking and dream there are thoughts, and consequently there is also a world. Bhagavan considered the world we experience in dream to be no more real or no less real than this world. It's all, according to Bhagavan, just a mental projection. This is Bhagavan's experience, but he says you have to make it your own experience, otherwise knowing all this is not going to be of much use to you. And then he explains how this projection takes place. Just as a spider spins out a thread from within itself and the grain draws it back into itself, so the mind projects the world from within itself and again dissolves it into itself. That is, as soon as we wake up in the morning or as soon as we start to dream, we project the world. So long as we continue attending to it, that world exists. Then when we fall back into sleep or switch from waking to dream or dream to waking, that one world disappears, another world appears, or if we slip into sleep, all worlds disappear. When the mind comes out from Atma-swarupa, when the mind comes out from Atma-swarupa, that's from self, the world appears. Therefore, when the world appears, our swarupa, that's our own essential self, does not appear as it really is. And when swarupa shines as it really is, the world does not appear. So we can't see the world and see self at the same time, because the world is nothing but self in a distorted form. So long as we are experiencing the mind, the thoughts, the world, all these things, these are all a distortion and are preventing us from seeing what it really is, which is self. In order to see that, we have to know it, we have to turn within and know ourselves. Then he says, if one goes on investigating the nature of the mind, it will end as self alone is mind. That is, it will turn out that self alone is what now appears to be the mind. And just as self is what appears to be the mind, self is also what appears to be what the mind has projected, all this world and all the thoughts. And the word he uses there is a Tamil word, Nāṉ, for self, which is a simple Tamil word. So he says what is here called self or Nāṉ is only Atma-swarupa. He's just clarifying the terms he's using there. And then he says a little bit more about the mind. This is an important clue he gives here. Mind stands only by always going after a gross object. That is, only by attaching itself to a body and by thinking of other thoughts is the mind able to exist, to stand. Without these things, it does not stand. Solitarily, it does not stand. Here again, some definitions. Mind alone is described as Sukshma Sarira, the subtle body, and as Jiva, the soul or individual self. Then in the next paragraph, he again says more about the nature of the mind. He defines the mind as what rises in this body as I, that alone is mind. That is the feeling, we all have a feeling of I. We feel that I within a body, and we feel the body is I. That is because the mind can rise only by grasping this body and taking it to be I. Not that the body exists without the mind. The mind rises and projects a body which it then identifies as I. That which thus rises and projects a body and identifies it as I, that is the mind. If we investigate in what place the thought I rises first in the body, we will come to know that it rises in heart. That's in the innermost core of our being. Some people mistake this sentence because Bhagavan says if we investigate in what place, they immediately think of a place in the body. But Bhagavan uses the word place in Tamil, idam, in a very idiomatic way. In some, later on he says the place where there's no thought I is self. So where he uses place here, we should understand the state or the reality is what he's talking about. And when he says you'll come to know that place is the heart, that the mind rises in the heart doesn't mean a location in the body. Heart means the core of our being. Bhagavan often says the heart is self. It's not on the right or the left or up or down. It is what really is. But it's easy to mistake these things wrongly if we're not approaching it with the correct understanding of Bhagavan's teachings. Nothing Bhagavan is talking about is about the physical. He's talking only about consciousness, about the spiritual, what is real. And he then says that the heart alone is the birthplace of the mind. That is, it's the source, is that from which the mind arises. And then he gives another practical clue. Even if we remain thinking I, it will take us and leave us in that place. That is, many people have difficulty at first knowing how to practice self-inquiry, how to focus the attention on I. So Bhagavan says, this is a very simple clue. Bhagavan says, even if you go on thinking I, that will draw your attention towards what that word denotes. If I say dog, immediately an image of a dog comes to our mind. If I say book, an object comes to our mind. So also when we say I, it denotes something. It denotes a particular feeling in us, a particular consciousness in us. So if we find it difficult at first to grasp how to attend only to I, Bhagavan says even if we remain thinking I, it will draw our attention back to that place, to the heart, to what we really are. And then in the next sentence he says, of all the thoughts that appear in the mind, the thought I alone is the first thought. These words, the thought I alone is the first thought, he put in bold type. And he repeats the same sentence later on. This is a very important teaching of his. The mind, there's so many thoughts in the mind, but the root of all the thoughts, the word he uses, when he says first thought, he says mudul ennam, or mudul ninivu here. Mudul means not only first, it means what is primal, basic, original, and also what is causal. God is sometimes called mudul, the first, in the sense that he is not only the origin of the world, but he's also the prime cause of the world. So also, but Bhagavan says the prime cause of everything is actually only this thought I. And the difference between the thought I and the real I is the thought I is when the pure consciousness I attaches itself to a body and experiences the body as I. That is what Bhagavan calls the thought I. And that thought I is the subject, the thinker, that thinks all other thoughts. So no other thought can exist without this first thought I. He says, only after this rises do other thoughts rise. Only after the first person appears do the second and third persons appear. Without the first person, the second and third persons do not exist. Here, first person means I, second and third person means everything else. Bhagavan often used this terminology, first person, second person, and third person. And in other places he explains a bit more about what's the difference between second and third person. Second person is what we experience most immediately. The third person is what we think about at a distance. But they're all only thoughts, so essentially second and third persons are the same. That's the end of the fifth paragraph. Then in the sixth paragraph, this is the paragraph where he first comes down to really talking about the practice. And this paragraph also is something that people often misunderstand, and it's very easy to misunderstand it from the English translations, because the word, one word that Bhagavan uses here is vichara, or vicharane,
and he uses it both as a noun and as a verb. So if that's translated correctly as a noun, investigation, as a verb, investigate, then it won't give room to the wrong meaning that some people have taken. But some people have translated as inquire. Well, inquiry and investigation is essentially the same. But the problem with the word inquiry, it has a connotation of, we also inquire, use inquire when we ask a question. But one here isn't talking about asking questions. He's talking about actually investigating. So when he says, if we investigate, who am I? He doesn't mean that we sit there asking ourselves the question, who am I? Because that's just, who am I? The words who am I are just a thought. What he means is, if we investigate who am I, if we investigate what we really are. So in this paragraph he begins by saying, only by means of the investigation of who am I will the mind subside. And the word he uses for subside can have many meanings. It can include both temporary subsidence and also, in this context, it also means the absolute subsidence of the mind, the total destruction of the mind. So that will happen only by means of this inquiry, who am I? That is because so long as we attend to anything other than I, our mind is going outwards, and all the world appears, thoughts appear, therefore self doesn't appear. In order to experience self as it really is, we have to withdraw our attention from all other things, and the only way to withdraw our attention from all other things is to focus it on I. When we focus it on I, the mind subsides. When we focus it on anything else, the mind rises and becomes active. Then he gives a simple analogy. He says, the thought who am I, having destroyed all other thoughts, will itself in the end be destroyed like a corpse burning stick. That is, in India when corpses are cremated, they usually use a stick to stir the funeral pyre to make sure that everything burns properly. But the stick also catches fire, and in the end they throw that also into a funeral pyre, it gets consumed. So Bhagavan says, well, thought who am I is like that. By thought who am I, again, he doesn't mean the words, like repeating it as a verbalized thought. What he means is the desire to know who we are, and the effort that we make to attend to ourselves in order to know who we are. That's what he means by the thought who am I. And then he gives a very nice explanation how to deal with other thoughts, because if we had this is where bhakti comes in. Bhakti means love, and bhakti, Bhagavan says, the real bhakti is the love to attend to I and to know I. So if we had that real bhakti, the real love to know I, other thoughts wouldn't be a problem, because if we're reading a book with great interest, or watching a film with great interest, or doing anything with great interest, whatever noises are going on around us doesn't disturb us, because we're so interested in that. So also if we're so interested in attending to I, we won't be distracted by other thoughts. The fact we are distracted by other thoughts means we don't yet have enough love to be attending only to I. But because the other thoughts are constantly distracting us, we have to keep on drawing our attention back to I. And Bhagavan gives a clue for how we can do it. Though he describes this process in words, once we have got accustomed to the process, it's no longer to go through the verbalized steps. But anyway, how he describes it in words is, if other thoughts rise, it is necessary, without trying to complete them, to investigate to whom they've occurred. Then he says, without trying to complete them. If we pay attention to thoughts, the thought will just sweep us away. So we shouldn't try to follow any thought. We shouldn't try to complete any thought. As soon as a thought arises, we should try to investigate to whom has this thought occurred. And when we to the next one bit there. Okay. Yeah. Okay. okay, yes, sorry, I hadn't looked at it. In the next sentence he says, however many thoughts arise, what does it matter? As soon as each thought appears, if we vigilantly investigate to whom it has occurred, it will be clear that it is to me. If we but investigate who am I, our mind will return to its birthplace. That is the core of our being, the place from which it arose. So some people find it helpful at first when the thoughts arise of, oh, to whom has it risen? To me? Who am I? They find it useful to think it through in steps, but that's helpful at first, but it's not really necessary. And that's not what Bhagavan is saying, that we should continue repeating the words all the time. He just means as soon as any thought arises, it should remind us. No thought can arise without us being there to think it and us being there to experience it. So the existence of any thought or any perception or anything should remind us of us, our own existence. So we should, whatever we see, whatever we hear, whatever we think, should remind us that we are there and that we should be attending to ourselves. That's basically what Bhagavan is saying. So anything that appears to distract us, instead of allowing it to distract us, we should use it to remind us that we are there to experience it. So who am I? Attend to I. Try to find out what is this I who's experiencing all these things. So he says, if we investigate who am I, our mind will return to its birthplace. That's to the source, the self. And then he says, the thought which had risen will also subside. The reason the thought will subside is because thoughts rise only because we attend to them. If we withdraw our attention from thoughts and attend instead to ourself, there's no one to attend to thought, so the thought will subside, and along with it, mind will also subside back into its source. So he then says, when we practice in this manner, to our mind the power to stand firmly established in its birthplace will increase. That is, by repeatedly drawing our attention back towards I whenever it slips away, our mind will gain the power that the mind has to abide in self, to abide in its source, will increase. So that is the first half of this paragraph. He's dealt with that's really dealing with the practice, and then the second part is not wholly about the practice, but it's connected with that. He then says, when the subtle mind goes out through the portal of the brain and sense organs, gross names and forms appear. By gross names and forms, he means all our thoughts and all the objects of the world. When the subtle mind remains in the heart, the core of our being, names and forms disappear. Like the thoughts and the objects of the world disappear. And then he says, only to this state of retaining our mind in heart, that's in its source, in self, without letting it go outwards, does the name ahamukam or antamukam apply. That is, this state, that's an idiomatic way of saying in Tamil, this state of keeping our mind in the heart is what is called ahamukam. That means facing inwards or facing towards I, or antamukam, facing inwards. And then he says in the next sentence, only to the state of letting our attention, letting our mind or attention go outwards, or only to the state of letting it go outwards, does the name bahimukha, or extroversion, outward-facing apply. So whenever Bhagavan talks of introversion, he means only attending to I, facing I. According to some people, think that if you're sitting thinking in your thoughts, you're introverted. That's not introversion according to Bhagavan's definition. If you're attending to any thought, that is bahimukam, that is extroversion, because you're attending to something other than yourself. Only when you attend only to yourself, that alone is introversion. And then he says, only when our mind remains firmly established in heart, that's in its source, in self, in this manner, will what is called I, which is the root of all thoughts, leave, and will the ever-existing self alone shine. That is, when we keep our attention in ourself, only on I, this false side, the mind, the I thought, which is the root of all other thoughts, will subside, and what will then remain shining alone is the ever-existing real self, what we really are. And here, in the next sentence, he says, the place devoid of even the slightest trace of the thought I is self. Here, this is the sentence I was referring to earlier, where he defines self as a place. Obviously, he doesn't mean a physical place. He doesn't mean a place in time and space. Place here means the state in which there's absolutely no trace of the first thought I. That alone is self. And he also says that alone is called silence, mona. It's called mona obviously because there's no thoughts there, no activities. So Bhagavan often said, mona, silence is itself the self. Silence is our real nature. Silence is the supreme reality. And then he says, only to this state of thus just being does the name Jnana Drishti apply. And Jnana Drishti means, literally it means knowledge sight. Basically it means the experience of true knowledge. But as he explains later on, it's misinterpreted popularly by many people in many different ways. But Bhagavan said the real meaning of Jnana Drishti, the experience of true knowledge, is only just being still, remaining in silence, remaining in self, without thinking anything else. And then he defines what is the state of just being, or simmo iripudu. Just being, or simmo iripudu, is only the state of making our mind subside in self, in Atma-swarupa. So that only that state where the mind is completely subsided in self, that is the state of just being. So just being is another way of describing both the practice of self-inquiry and the attainment of self-knowledge. Both are the state of being, just being. And then in the next sentence he deals with all the popular meanings for the word Jnana Drishti. He says, besides this non-dual state of just being, the dualistic states of knowledge, such as knowing the thoughts of others, knowing the three times, that's knowing past, present, future, and knowing what is happening in a distant place, none of these can be Jnana Drishti. None of these can be the experience of true knowledge. It's not necessary that I read the whole thing unless you want me to continue reading it. So if anyone has any questions, does anyone have any questions so far? Or feel free to...
I have a sort of question.
Yes.
It's been going around in my mind as you've been talking.
Yes.
And what's coming to me is the impact of his awakening and how he described it. And
Yes.
I think this is, totally involved in what you're saying.
Yes.
But if we go back to that, we can talk about it now, because in the book,
Yes.
the Arthur Osborne book, the chapter is I'm forgetting the name of the chapter now. Awakening.
Yes.
And that is so beautiful, and it can take nearly a lifetime. I found one can read that over and over, I won't say how many years, but it's not, you know it's the truth,
Yes.
but it's not coming alive,
Yes.
because you're just believing it as truth.
Yes.
And then one day you start to take it very seriously,
Yes.
and he's talking about how he was overcome with this powerful fear of death.
Yes.
Which is something that most of us, of course, don't experience.
Yes.
I mean, we don't consider it.
Yes.
And the way he describes it is so helpful. He's overcome by the fear of death. He actually practices, as far as one can, rigor mortis, doesn't he? He goes into a state of rigor mortis. This isn't often talked about, but it was crucial to him. And in that state of rigor mortis, or whatever we call it, he then beautifully describes it, and he's saying something along the lines, I was overcome by the fear of death, and so on. The words are going to leave me now, I've got them in the back of my mind. The body is silent and inert. The body is silent and inert, but I feel the full power of my personality, and even the I transcending the body. So the body dies, but the I that transcends it cannot be ended by death. So I am, wait a second, I know this so well and I'm just thinking about it. I am the spirit transcending body. The body dies, but the spirit that transcends it can never be touched by death. That is my reality. I am the deathless I. And, I needn't be listening because we're able to the chapter, it's so easy. But it describes it so beautifully. Yes. I am the deathless spirit. Yes. Spirit is a word isn't often used nowadays. I'm told that Christianity has kind of not cared for this word, spirit. But for those of us who understand and we do practice, it makes it has a lot of meaning. Yes. And so I just wanted to share this because we can turn at any time to these pages, awakening, and it's illuminating.
Well,
you're putting it into a lot of words.
Yeah. Well, what Bhagavan, these are Bhagavan's words here, but basically what he said here, what he taught to Shikha into life, is what he himself experienced. As you rightly said, it is that when he was overcome by the fear of death. Yes. He described his experience at that time in so many words, but he also, when he described it, he said, though I describe it now in words, there wasn't any thought involved. All this came as a flash of direct experience. What happened was, when the fear of death arose, Bhagavan was so intensely afraid of death, normally when a fear of death comes to us, what do we think of? We think of all the things that we're attached to in this world. We think of our mother, father, children, brothers, sisters, friends. We think of our status in life. We think of our bank balance. We think of all the things that we are liable to lose at the time of death. So because our concern is with all these external things, the fear of death doesn't really grip us, because as soon as we start thinking of these things, death somehow seems very unreal. It's very difficult for us to imagine, but one day we're going to be dead. Everyone knows we're going to die one day, but it somehow doesn't seem real because we're so alive now. And in fact, Bhagavan says, why, even in the midst of a battle, soldiers don't think they see their comrades dying around them, but they think, I'm not going to die at this moment, I'm going to live at least for another moment, I'm going to survive at least today. Because that is because of a reality within us. Because we are truly the deathless spirit, it is not real to us to think of our non-existence. In fact, we never can not exist. But because we take this body to be I, we somehow superimpose that immortality upon this body, and we live our life with the assumption that we're going to be around indefinitely. In Bhagavan's case, his mind, because obviously in previous jन्मs, previous lives, he had been through all this before. So his mind didn't have all the desires and attachments that our mind has. So when the fear of death came to him, he didn't fear to lose his mother, his relatives, or any of these things. What he feared to lose was himself, his own existence, his own being. So what the fear of death made him investigate is, when death comes to the body, will I die? But he didn't even think it in those words, but I mean, that's what immediately struck his mind when that fear came. So immediately his mind turned within to find out, what is this I? Is this I something that's going to die with the death of the body? And because his mind went in with such intensity, he didn't actually enact. It's in the English recording of it, it's slightly misinterpreted. But Bhagavan said it wasn't an enactment. He died. His body, his heart stopped beating, his breath stopped, everything stopped. For about 20 minutes his body was lying there as a corpse because of the intensity with which his attention went in. And when his attention went inwards, that flash of knowledge came and he experienced himself as the deathless spirit. He didn't think, I am the deathless spirit. But actually the experience came to him of what he really is. And for 20 minutes his body was lying there lifeless. Then Bhagavan said, all of a sudden, something shot from the right side to the left side, and the heart and everything started functioning again. We can understand that as, because for Bhagavan, that body has served its purpose. He had discarded it. He no longer needed that body. It wasn't for him. In fact, the person who had occupied that body before, Venkataraman, was dead, completely annihilated. There was no more any Venkataraman. But because the power of grace, the divine power, had a purpose for that body, but that body was to be the guru for all of us and to give us these teachings to show us how we can get out of this. For the divine purpose of that body, we can say the grace of God, or whatever terms we want to use for it, brought life back to that body, so that through that body, our own self could then teach us all that we needed to know, so that we too can have the same experience. So exactly the same thing that he describes in that when he describes what happened to him at that time. He described it in words because there's no other way of describing it. He said the only real way of describing it, the only real teaching, is silence. But because our minds are outward going, we're not able to listen to it, we're not able to hear his silence, we're not able to grasp the meaning of the silence. So he says in words, and all his words are pointing only in one direction. Look within, see the I. That's the whole essence of his teachings. That's what it's all about. That's what he did in a split second, and that's what we could also do in a split second if we have the same maturity of mind that he had. But because our minds are attached to external things, our love for self is correspondingly diminished. The more we're attached to other things, the less we have the real requisite swapna bhakti, the love to be just as we really are.
And of course he was so young, and he hadn't accumulated all
Yes.
the baggage that most of us have as we go through.
I think he had as much baggage as all of us, because none of us are young. Actually, body is young, but the baggage we come. If you see a small child, at what age does a personality start manifesting in a child? Any mother will tell you, if a mother's had 6 children, she'll tell you, you can tell very early on, each child has its own personality from, we can't say when, because we all come to this world with baggage of countless previous lives. So Bhagavan had all that baggage, but he also had the baggage of the spiritual practice he had done in the previous life. That is why Bhagavan once, in Tamil there's a term, Vittakarai Tottakarai. Vittakarai Tottakarai means what was left undone was resumed again. So what wasn't completed was resumed again. So he had very nearly reached that point, but because there was a divine purpose, he was born again to live another 16 years in a state of seeming ignorance, in order that that body should serve the purpose that the body was destined to serve, which is to be the guru for all of us. So in Bhagavan's view, the children and old people all have equal amount of baggage, all have the same problem. He doesn't think you're wise just because you're old, or you're unwise because you're young. We're wise if we've learned to free our mind from its attachments and to attend to self. Then we are wise. If not, we are foolish. And I think most of us will be happy to admit we're very, very foolish. So that's the difference in Bhagavan as a 16-year-old as us. He was actually much older in terms of maturity. He was much more mature than we are. And so it happened in a moment. For us, we've still got to tread the path that he would have trodden in previous lives in order to reach that point of maturity at which he can just swallow us as he will swallow.
If I may ask a question.
Yes.
You mentioned 2 points. One is Nāṉ Yār, who am I?
Yes.
And Samanayeru, be
Yes.
still.
Yes.
Now there is a difference between the two, in the sense that if you are still, you are even without a thought of who am I.
Who am I is not a thought. Though Bhagavan calls it a thought in one place, he does say the thought, who am I. But a thought is, when we attend to other things, that is a thought. When we attend to I, all thoughts, including the first thought, I, subsides.
Who am I is not a thought.
Not a thought. But what Bhagavan means by who am I is not a thought. Though we can... It's a thought in the sense of it's a paying of attention.
Yes.
But it's not a thought in the sense of it's not an attention to anything other than I. So, because it's an attention to I, it's a state of stillness. When we attend to anything other than I, our attention moves away from ourselves. That is mental activity, movement is there. That is a state of doing, of action, karma. But when we turn our attention towards I, all activity ceases. Because our attention doesn't have to go anywhere, because the attention is just remaining in its source. The very nature of self is to know itself, is to be aware of itself, to attend to itself. But
Is it possible to be still without even asking the question, who am I?
If you're asking the question, who am I, you're not still. Because asking the question, who am I, is an activity. That's why I said Bhagavan hasn't told us to ask who. He doesn't, in Tamil, if you see it, he doesn't in any place say, ask who am I. Investigate. Investigating who am I means being still. Means attending to I. As soon as you attend to I, that is the state of being still. That's what he says here. He says, this state of retaining the state of retaining the mind in the heart without letting it go outwards is called ahamukam or bahimukam, and ahamukam or antamukam. Only when the mind thus remains established in the heart does the I disappear. And where the I disappears, that is self. And then he says, after describing all that, he said, only this state is the state called Sumayiru. So he's very clearly equating here the state of Sumayiru with the state of self-attention, state of self-attentiveness, state of self-awareness, which is what Atma-vichara is. The words who am I are just a description of that state of self-investigation. We can't investigate, if you want to investigate what's in this book, you have to look inside. You can't just say, what is in this book, what is in this book, you're never going to know. When you look inside, you can see and read it. Then you know what's inside. So also, to investigate who am I, we have to look at this I, see what it is. So that state of looking at I, of being self-aware, that is the state of inquiry, and that is the state of Sumayiru, just being. There's absolutely no difference. If you do any other type of meditation, you're thinking of something other than I. In fact, any spiritual practice other than self-inquiry is an attention paid to something other than I. Whether you're doing pranayama, or you're meditating, or any type of spiritual practice. So many different types of meditation are there. They say to meditate on different places in the body, to meditate on thought of God. It's all attention to something other than I. This is where the teaching, what Bhagavan has taught us, the path of self-inquiry, is fundamentally different to every other type of spiritual practice. Because so long as we're attending to anything other than I, the mind is active. In fact, we're feeding the mind. The only benefit we can get from other sadhanas is we can free the mind from its grosser forms of attachment. We can gain chitta suddhi, purity of mind. That's the only purpose of all other sadhanas, whether worship or yoga or any type of sadhana. The only benefit of it is to gain purity of mind.
That's a key, because without the purity of mind, one can't do the practice. So
yes, but if you can get purity of mind by attending to something else, that's a very slow way of gaining purity of mind. What is the quick way of gaining purity of mind?
That is more efficient, would it be?
Oh, much more efficient.
It may depend also on individual samskaras and so on, as to what is the best.
But Bhagavan has said this is the direct path for all. Bhagavan hasn't said this path is not possible for anyone. We set the limitation on ourselves and say, oh, I'm not yet mature enough for this. This path is very difficult for me. I'll do something easy. I'll do japa, or I'll do meditation, or I'll do this, or I'll do that. This is us putting an obstacle in Bhagavan's way. Bhagavan says, you're there, here and now. Nothing you know so clearly as you know I. In order to know anything else, you first have to know I. So Bhagavan says that of all paths, this path is the easiest. In Atma-vichara, he says. But any other path, this path is the easiest, he says.
But in actual practice, when things come up from the subconscious,
yes,
then they deflect you, in fact. However,
one
says one wants to do that.
Okay, they do deflect us.
They are very powerful deflections.
What is deflecting us? It is not actually those things. It is our interest in them.
Sure.
So we are the cause of the problem.
Yes.
So who is so interested in attending to all these things? If you turn to find out who that fellow is, he disappears and self alone remains. That is why this clue given by Bhagavan, to whom, to me, who am I? It's not actually a three-step process. He's just describing how, whatever we experience, if we experience difficulty, who is experiencing the difficulty?
But the deflection is such that even the realization that one should attend to that practice is deflected. You're actually thrown into another.
That is why perseverance is the only way.
Sure,
instead of persevering, I want to walk to Rome, but it's a bit difficult. The Alps are in the way. So instead of going that way, I was walking the other direction. It's a bit like saying that. Choosing to do any other meditation, It's just putting things off. It's really not helping very much. We may gain a little purity of mind, but why it takes... We've been practicing these things for so many lives, and we've gained a little bit of purity of mind. The very fact that we're interested in this path, the very fact that we're drawn to Bhagavan, the very fact that this path is of interest to us, itself shows that we've come a long way. If you tell people in the street about it, nobody's going to be interested. 1 in 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000 will be interested. And even if you go to a place where people are all very interested in meditation or something and tell them about it, most of them won't be interested. No, my guru has said this meditation will definitely lead me there. So they're ready to go on with whatever they're believing, and Bhagavan never tells them, oh, you shouldn't do that, you should do this. Only if people come to Bhagavan and say, Bhagavan, what should I do? First he says, you need not do anything, but if you want to do something, attend to I. But why should we have to attend to I? Because we're not able to do nothing. We say, oh Bhagavan, I can't do anything. That is totally false. We are experts at doing. We're doing things all the time, doing something or other. We're all good at doing, but we're not good at being. We're not good at just being. So because we are not able just to be, Bhagavan gives us a clue. Okay, instead of thinking of other things, think of yourself. When you think of yourself, your attention turns towards I. Mind is no longer fed with other things to think about, it subsides, and the state of being remains. It's so simple.
One can simplify it by saying, just turning the attention inwards,
yes,
searching for the source of I.
Yes. We don't even have to search for it, because
you
are the source of I.
Yes, but I mean...
So what to search for?
Well, the attention is investigating inwards.
Investigating. We just have to look at it, scrutinize it, look keenly at it.
Yes.
And avoid letting ourselves be distracted by anything else. And it's like looking at a light, because the source, what is the light that illumines this world, and enables us to know this world, is the light of consciousness. We are that light. If we attend to ourselves, we are looking directly at the light. What will purify the mind more than looking directly at that original light? So it's like comparing a jet with a snail. All the other sadhanas are a snail pace and not even going in the right direction. They may be getting us a little bit closer, but they're going off at a tangent. This is the direct path, and also by far and away the quickest path. So why waste time doing other things? If we can spend even a moment doing, this, we may fail in 100 other moments. But at least that one moment where we succeed in doing this is more worthwhile than spending all that time doing some other type of meditation.
Just to perhaps put it a slightly different way. Mountains at the top,
yes,
right? And it's a pretty steep climb. If you want to go directly up, you've got a really steep climb.
Yes.
Now, another way of doing it might be to go around like this,
yes,
so that you are not overwhelmed by what you stir up when you go directly.
Yes. But one thing, Bhagavan's path is not a mountain path. It is
that's
I know we use it, but sometimes sometimes the metaphors we use are actually misleading. Because we think of it as something very steep. We don't have to go anywhere.
Sure.
It's here and now. So why to think of metaphors that are going to make it seem difficult to us? It's our mind doesn't want to cling to I, because that is suicide to the mind. Why the mind? If you may be able to do some other meditation, you may be able to fix your mind on a jyoti or light or on a name or form of God. You may be able to concentrate on that for hours on end. But can you concentrate on I, even for a few seconds? your mind will be much more rebellious if you try to attend to I than if you try to attend to anything else.
Absolutely.
Because so long as you're attending to anything else, you're feeding the mind. The mind's existence isn't threatened. But when you attend to I, the mind's existence is threatened. So use every resource it's got to struggle for its survival.
But in the actual practice of sadhana, so many subconscious things come up which affect the body and people's health. They get ill and all that sort of thing. So if you're really trying to go for it, then actually maybe it is more than you can cope with.
Right.
I mean, from that point.
Bhagavan
people get very ill.
Bhagavan said that tends to happen particularly in yoga practices. In yoga practices you're trying to force things. But in this case, in the case of self-inquiry, Bhagavan said you can't force it. Because the very nature of self is, the very nature of the path, it can't be forced. Unless you have love to do it, you won't do it. So if you find it's a struggle and you find you're getting ill or something, it's because you're not doing it. So Bhagavan said, just relax. Don't make it a struggle, because so long as you're making it a struggle, you're going away from the point you want to be.
Yeah, there's a goal.
That's why he said it's a state of summa iripudu, it's a state of total relaxation. If we really attend to it. But it is one reason why it's easy to attend to concentrate on other things, but not easy to concentrate on I. So long as we're attending to anything else, it's like if you've got a ball filled with air, so long as it's floating on the surface of the sea, it has no problem. If you want it to face in one direction, it can continue facing in that direction. But as soon as you try to push it down, it's going to try and pop up this way or this way or this way. Trying to turn our mind towards self is very like that. It keeps on popping up again. That is, what is driving it is to pop up, is our attachments, our desires. So when the thought comes, it's because we prefer to think of that thought than to attend to I. So the only effective way to deal with this is to try again and again and again. That is why Bhagavan says, perseverance is the only way. In fact, once Bhagavan said, I think it's in talks or something, I can't remember where, but Bhagavan said, when someone asked, what is the sign of progress? Bhagavan said, perseverance is the only sign of progress. So long as you're persevering, you can be sure you're progressing. When you cease persevering, that is when you're not progressing. And when you go off to do, I'll do this sadhana instead, I'll do this sadhana instead, that is not persevering. Persevering means, what is our aim? Our aim is to know I. So we should attend to I, nothing else. That should be our aim. It is, for all of us, it's a struggle, but we just have to do it because there's nothing so worthwhile as doing as this. Yes?
Now, Michael, you're talking as if the mind is very real.
Yes.
Yeah. But you've also said, haven't you, that the mind is not really real, it doesn't really exist.
Why we are talking about the need to know self? Because the mind appears very real to us. The whole context of Bhagavan's teachings is the context in which the mind and all its products appears real to us. So Bhagavan accepts, for the purposes of explaining his teaching, he accepts that the mind appears to be real. But what he says is, see whether it's real. Don't just take it for granted that it's real. And that's what the self-inquiry is about. We're investigating the mind. Is this mind real or not? But it's not the other thoughts. Bhagavan says, the mind boils down to this first thought I. Because all the other thoughts arise only after this I rises. All the other thoughts are thought by this I. So this I is the root of the mind. See whether this is real or not. So we investigate that aspect of the mind, the first person aspect of the mind. If you investigate that, the mind and all its products will disappear and self alone will remain. But so long as we are still struggling, we have to accept the mind appears real. We don't have to accept that the mind is real. We certainly have to accept that it but it appears to us to be real.
Yes,
it appears to whom? It appears to mind to be real.
Yes, it seems so contradictory in a way, because you're saying that basically what we're aiming at is a completely relaxed state of just being.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it seems that you're indicating that this is impossible for us to. It's like us trying to push down this ball into the water.
It's not impossible. It requires, when we push it down, if we avoid letting it slip from one way or another, if we've got enough pressure in our hand, we can push it down. We just have to be aware that it's going to constantly be trying to get out in one way or other. But if the pressure is there, we can push it down. That pressure is the pressure of love to know self. So it's not impossible. It may appear difficult because it appears difficult because of the force of our desires and attachments.
You see, and then again, there's another all the time. Now, for example, you said then what makes us be able to do this is our love to know the self.
Yes.
The self. But we are the self. You're also saying.
We are the self, yes. But now. We are the self, yes, then there's no problem. But we feel there's a problem, don't we?
Oh, certainly.
Yeah, so long as we feel there's this problem, we've got to deal with it. And the way to deal with it, Bhagavan says, is to find out whether this problem exists.
Yes, but you're saying that yes, we've got to deal with this problem, and we've got to make an effort.
Yes.
We've got to make an effort to reach this effortless state.
Yes,
Doesn't
yes,
that sound
yes.
a little bit?
Yes, that does seem contradictory, but it is not actually, no effort is required to be in the effortless state. But from a perspective of the mind, which is always going outwards, it appears to be an effort just to keep still.
The talk was incredibly inspiring, and that obviously is the role of doing what you're doing, which is to inspire us. And I tend to be very practical.
Yes.
So I understand what you're saying about this being the fastest path and practicing pranayama and all the rest of it, but don't you think that maybe for certain people, I mean, even Bhagavan, didn't he recommend to certain people to do things like pranayama? To the extent that...
Well, his own core Bhagavan didn't recommend anything. When people asked Bhagavan questions, he answered their questions. If they asked him what they should do, he said, do self-enquiry. If they say, can I do pranayama? Do pranayama. That's not recommending it. He's just, if they want to do it, Bhagavan's not going to say, no, don't do that. But he's made it very clear that pranayama is not a means to destroy the mind. The only means to destroy the mind is, who am I?
Pranayama will slow down the mind, though, won't
it will slow down the mind, but what's the use of slowing down the mind? So long as he's explained about that very clearly here. To make the mind subside, there is no adequate means other than vichara. If restrained by other means, the mind will remain as if subsided, but will emerge again. Even by pranayama, the mind will subside. However, though the mind remains subsided, so long as the breath remains subsided, when the breath emerges, it will also emerge and wander under the sway of its vasanas. The birthplace of both the mind and the prana is one. Thought alone is the swarupa of the mind. The thought I alone is the first thought of the mind. It alone is the ego. From where the ego arises, from there alone the breath also starts. Therefore, when the mind subsides, the prana also subsides, and when the prana subsides, the mind also subsides. Therefore, pranayama is just an aid to restrain the mind, but will not bring about mananasa. No. It's a temporary thing.
Of course, all these things are temporary.
But
from the point of view of from the relative point of view, a lot of us are walking around with extremely busy minds. I mean,
yes.
Let's be honest.
Yes.
And
who is walking around with a busy mind?
our minds are busy.
Our mind, whose mind?
Yeah, you know, I totally understand where you're coming from. You're always directing us, which is the teaching.
If you're a practical person, that is what we should be interested in. Whose mind is it? Okay, mind is active, but whose mind is it? Who is experiencing that activity? The activity doesn't matter. What matters is who is experiencing it. If we're interested in the person experiencing it, the activity will subside of its own accord. The activity is perpetuated because we're interested in it. And if we use methods like pranayama in order to subdue the activity, again we are taking interest in the activity and the means to subdue it. Bhagavan says ignore the activity, ignore thoughts, don't give any room for thoughts. Simply attend to I. If any thought comes, investigate to whom it has come. So we don't have to worry about thoughts. We don't even have to think about thoughts. Or about any means to put an end to thoughts, because thoughts aren't our concern. Our concern is to know who is experiencing them.
Okay, one other thing, and not to be negative.
Right.
You say it's the only path, or Ramana said it's the only path.
Yes.
Or the quickest path. However, it seems to me that the people who did attain realization through this path had all spent time either with Ramana or one of his main disciples. I don't know if there are many people like us leading a kind of normal life in the world who actually, maybe there are, I don't know, but it seems to me that...
There may be so many people living ordinary lives who aren't known. It's not necessary. If someone realizes self, they're not going to go advertising it. They're just going to...
No, but people get to know, don't they?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily at all. And Bhagavan has said you don't have to be a sannyasi, you don't have to live any special sort of life in order to realize self. Because self is here and now. It's got nothing to do with the outward life we lead. Self is as accessible to a person who's living a busy outward life as it is to a sadhu who's sitting in a cave.
Yes, but the path, I mean, it sounds all very direct and straightforward, and of course it is. However, you know, living in the complex world that we're living in, it helps to have a guide, doesn't it, of some kind?
Bhagavan has, well, if we want an outward guide, Bhagavan is there. But Bhagavan has said, anything outward comes and goes. The real guide is the I within you. Let that be your guide. That's what Buddha also said. Let self be your light, let self be your guide.
A lot of people say that without a living teacher it is extremely hard.
Because a lot of people, their minds are caught up in the seeming reality of the physical world. They attach importance to physical things.
We do. I mean, that's the truth, isn't it?
Yes,
we do,
but,
otherwise we wouldn't be where we are
but
now.
if we know that is the problem, the whole problem is that. So a physical guru is not going to solve any problems for us.
No,
so long as we think a physical guru is necessary. Because the whole point of guru is to turn your attention away from physical things towards I.
Exactly.
So you don't need a physical guru for that. If you think you need a physical guru, you fail to understand what the guru is telling you.
No, but I mean, the reality of our lives is that we're surrounded by people who are not thinking
There
this
is
way.
only one reality in life. Everything is a passing show. The only one reality is I. There is no other reality.
But in practice, you were with Sadhu for so many years.
That was the destiny of this body, was to do that.
Exactly.
And I don't say that in my for me personally, that was very necessary.
Sure.
Because it was necessary, Bhagavan gave that to me.
Exactly.
But if it's whatever outward help is necessary for us will be given automatically. Yes. We don't have to go seeking outward help. Bhagavan has said, don't look out, look within.
Yeah.
Michael, how did you come across Ramana Maharshi?
when I was young, I went to India looking for something, but having no idea at all what I was looking for. And during my travels around India and trying different types of meditation and this and that, I came to Tiruvannamalai. I read Bhagavan's teachings. As soon as I read Who Am I understood this is
Supreme technique.
This is for me. That's all I can say.
So is Atma-vichara an invention of Ramana? Is it him?
No. It is so long as, ever since there have been sages in this world, there have been Atma-vichara, because this is the only way to Buddha, Mahavira, Shankara, Rama, Krishna, whatever sage you mention, they all must have followed this path. If they didn't follow this path, they cannot know themselves.
So what is that makes Ramana different than any other so-called guru, of course, because the real guru is within. But what is making it?
Well, according to Bhagavan, there is no difference. Difference is just in the mind.
Yeah.
So Bhagavan would say there is no difference. From our perspective, we can say what is special about Bhagavan is how he presented this ancient path in such simple and such forceful terms.
Do you mean he made it affordable to the 20th century?
Yes.
People living with the 20th century?
Yes, he made it in, he put it in a particularly simple and a particularly forceful way. So in that is what is special about Bhagavan outwardly. But actually there's nothing special about Bhagavan, because Bhagavan is, once someone said to Bhagavan, your realization is unique in the history of the world's sages. And Bhagavan said, what is unique about it? What is special about it? What is special in me is special in you.
Yes, because it's very true what you're saying. But there is something about Ramana, is that as we understand from some books written about him, is that he didn't know anything about this philosophy until much later in his life.
Yes,
He
yes.
had actually already self-realized before even that he came across this teaching.
Yes, yes. When he was in Tiruvannamalai, people brought him books and asked him to explain the books. Then only he read. He openly read it. It was very clear because what the books were talking about was his own experience.
Exactly.
So he could explain it very easily. But he didn't need any books, and he didn't need any books of his own accord. Bhagavan didn't refer to scriptures or anything. It was only for people who were interested in those things that he talked. Otherwise, Bhagavan just gave his teaching in Who Am I? In such simple language. Very ordinary Tamil, very simple sentences are there. Ordinary words he uses. Okay, there are a few Vedantic philosophical words he also used because people are familiar with those words. So he used those words, but a lot of his teachings were just in everyday words like, who am I? You don't have to learn any philosophy to know the meaning of who am I. In Tamil it's just two words, Nāṉ Yār, I who. It is actually so simple, the path Bhagavan has taught us. Our mind complicates things. Our mind is complicated, so we make even the simplest thing complicated.
Yeah.
But what can be simpler than knowing oneself? He did do self-inquiry, but he didn't know it in terms of self-inquiry. He didn't know there was a name for it. All he knew, there was an intense fear of death.
Yeah.
Who is dying? Am I going to die with this body? That was all. Non-existence is just an idea. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. There is no such thing as non-existence.
Yeah.
It's just an idea. All these things are just ideas. Who has all these ideas? That's what we want to know. If we find out who it is who is experiencing all these ideas about life, death, existence, non-existence, if we experience that, then everything is answered.
Yeah.
Michael, can I? You said something very interesting. When in Nāṉ Yār, Bhagavan's essay, he says that the mind can only exist in relation to something gross.
Yes.
He meant simply by that the body did he?
Yes, he means the body and everything else that the mind attaches itself to. But the mind cannot rise without attaching itself to a body.
Yeah.
Whenever we experience ourselves as a mind, we experience ourselves as a body.
Right.
So the mind rises by projecting and identifying a body as I.
Yes.
Then, in order to, in Ulivnatu, Bhagavan says, Urupatri Undam, that is grasping a form, it comes into existence. Urupatri Urupatri Undam, grasping a form, it comes into being. Urupatri Nikkam, grasping form, it stands. Urupatri Undu Nika Ongam, that is, grasping and feeding upon forms, it expands and flourishes. Uruvittu Urupatram, leaving one form, it grasps another form. Tedinal Ottum Pidicum, if it's sought, it takes the flight. Such is the nature of Uruvatra Peyahande. This is the nature of the ghostly ego which has no form of its own.
Right.
So it is why the mind is always, when we try to turn our attention to self, why it tries to think of anything other than I, because that is what it has to cling to something in order to survive. Okay. So it's for its survival that it's projecting thoughts and trying to cling to them.
Right. Can I then ask you something which arises out of that? I mean, how in your daily existence, which consists of, I mean, action consists of thought. In order to get through a day, you have to think all the time. And you do think all the time.
Yes.
Well, but how do you hold on to the I thought and keep yourself?
Who is experiencing all that?
So you have to remember to ask yourself that all the time.
Yes, you don't even have to ask it as a question. You just have to remember that you are there experiencing all this. So take more interest in the experiencer than in what is experienced.
It's very difficult because, I mean, a whole day can pass without your sort of remembering to do this. I mean, if you get sort of horrible, if your anger sort of is aroused, or you feel sort of ecstatic about something, these sort of thoughts are completely obliterated. I mean, they don't arise.
That is what is called pramadam.
Yes.
Like inattentiveness.
That's
and pramadam is mityu.
That's the universal disease.
It is death. So long as we are not attending to self, we are dead.
Well, how do you manage it? How do you? Okay.
In the same way as you do, I struggle. We are all doing struggle. And it will continue to be a struggle until the last moment when the mind is destroyed.
Right.
Because the mind doesn't want to die.
Yeah.
So it will always be opposing our efforts.
Yeah.
So very benign attention. There are certain things that are very, very benign, like I'm just looking at those beautiful leaves behind you there, how they're swaying in the wind.
Yes.
And that takes my attention.
Yes.
It has a mind stilling quality.
Okay, you call that attention benign. What would you say is what type of attention is malignant?
Well, I suppose something that is, desiring something very strongly. So
some thoughts. So what you call benign thoughts are the thoughts that we're less attached to, and what you call malignant thoughts are the thoughts we're more attached to. It's just relative. The distinction. It's not really a very important distinction. Any attention to anything other than I is not benign, because it's taking us away from self.
Okay. I actually find it more difficult, in a way, to draw back from something that I would call more benign.
Exactly. So it is deceptively benign.
So in a way, the beautiful leaves with the sun on them and the way the wind goes through them is almost worse than desiring the best car, something like that.
Well, I think it is probably true for most of us in this room. We all have a relatively fairly easy life. If you compare the life we are each living to the life of many people, in the present age and in past ages. We aren't anyone's slave, we have relative freedom, we have, I mean, in so many ways our life is actually very cushy. But this benign state we're in is actually a deception. Sometimes people make more progress spiritually when they're in really adverse conditions, when they're really suffering.
Yeah.
So we should not let the benign nature of our present existence deceive us.
Which also means that we should embrace the drama in the life as well as the moments of happiness which we exteriorize, of course. Because they are needed in order to realize itself.
Yes and no. Actually, we shouldn't embrace anything except self, except I. We should reject everything else. But though we shouldn't embrace other things, we should accept other things. We should not react against other things. Whether pleasure or pain comes in our life, we should view it all with equanimity. We should not be overly attached to the pleasures. We should not be overly averse to the pains.
Observe it.
Not even observe it. Don't even observe it, because observing it again, you're feeding the mind. Ignore it.
Yeah.
Ignore it.
Ignore it, yes.
Ignorance is the key. The medicine for ignorance is ignorance. Ignoring the non-self is the medicine for our ignorance of self. Self-inquiry should be there at every moment. Whatever we experience, we should take that as a reminder that we are there experiencing it. So who am I?
I think earlier you were saying that Bhagavan said that you could just carry on in the world as normal, and you implied that maybe people are enlightened who are self-realized, who are just carrying on in ordinary businesses, and you wouldn't necessarily know that they were.
Yes.
Now they would be. I mean, if you're a businessman working in the city or something like that, and you're a stockbroker or something like that, could you really be self-realized and also seemingly so attached to making money?
Well, you wouldn't be attached to making money. If you were self-realized, you wouldn't be attached to anything. But yes, theoretically it's all possible. But when we think about these things, we're thinking about things other than I. So these are distractions for us. Actually, the truth is, there is no jnani in this world except one. And that one is you. There is no other jnani at all, because everyone else is just your mental projection. So if you want to find jnana, you have to find it in yourself.
Thank you. Yeah.
So our idea that this person is a jnani, Ramana Bhagavan is a jnani.
You're just attributing to some other individual some quality you don't even know what it is. You're just projecting onto this.
Yes.
It's just something in your own mind.
Yes.
It's like saying someone was a film star or something. They are self-realized.
Yes.
And it's just a fantasy.
It's a fantasy, because
it can't be in somebody else.
It can't be in someone else. It can only be in you. As you, yes, exactly.
How do you know what is real from what is unreal?
It depends what you mean by real. Generally, people take this world to be real, but Bhagavan, because we don't have a very high standard a very high definition of reality. Bhagavan gives a very strict definition of reality. If something is real, it has to be always real. It can't be real at one time, not real at another time. It has to be absolutely real, so that at all times, in all places, it can't change at all. Because if it changes, it was one thing at one time, another thing at another time, which was real. So it has to be eternal, it has to be unchanging. And the third most important characteristic of of reality that Bhagavan gave is it has to be self-shining. It has to know its own existence. What do you know that knows its own existence? I. Apart from that, nothing else knows its own existence. Only I knows its own existence. What we look at is our own thoughts, actually. It's just an idea.
It's all a projection.
Yeah. The fact that those stars are there is an idea. The fact that actually the light came from those stars so many billions of years ago is itself a thought. It's an idea only.
What's extraordinary about this, there's an anecdote about scientific discovering the oldest stars in the universe.
Yes.
28 billion years ago.
Yes.
Now we're looking at the stars.
Yes.
And so we're looking at the stars, but the stars actually doesn't exist anymore because the life expectancy of that star is about 8 billion years. So all we're seeing is the light of the stars. So when we look at the stars, where is the stars? Where is the stars?
It's all only in the mind, yes. And so everything we think.
Yet we recognize that star and think it's real.
Yes,
it's there. But where it is located right now, there's no more star.
Do you know why all this world appears real? Because it's a projection of the mind, and the mind appears to be real. Why does the mind appear to be real? Because we give it reality. By identifying ourselves with the mind, by taking ourselves to be the mind, we make the mind appear real, and thereby we make everything else appear real. If we withdraw ourselves from this whole show, none of it is real. So the only element of reality in all that we experience is I. Other than I, nothing is real. Other things are temporary, they come and they go. In sleep, it all disappears. Supposing that we didn't exist in sleep, how could we know that we slept? We are able to distinguish three states. We know now we're awake, and we know last night we dreamt for some time, but we also know we were asleep. We have no doubt that we weren't dreaming all night long. We know there was a time. The fact that we are able to, but we have that knowledge, the fact that we're able to distinguish between dream and deep sleep means that deep sleep was our experience. If we weren't there, we couldn't have experienced it. So all these three states, they're all part of our experience.
Yes.
They're all a passing show. All that we're talking about is ideas. Consciousness is an idea, there's photography is an idea, it's all ideas. Who is experiencing all this? We are talking about what is experienced. We are not talking about the experiencer. What we have to cease being interested in any type of experience and be interested in only in knowing who is the experiencer. That is the only way out of this.
That's what Ramana Maharshi said.
Yes.
But it's almost impossible. I mean, that implies the stopping of time. You get into a state in which you're totally outside time.
You don't have to stop time. You just have to see what you are. If you see what you are, then you'll see you alone exist. And there never was any such thing as time. It's not that time has stopped. Time doesn't exist.
I understand. The mind has invented time.
Yes. It's all a part of the mind. It's part of the myth called mind.
It just seems to me to be so impossible to stop mental movement.
You don't have to stop mental movement. You only have to know who you are. It's so simple. If the mind wants to move, let it move.
I think it's impossible to stop it, isn't it?
It doesn't matter whether it's possible or not. What's the benefit of stopping it? Stopping the mind is not our aim. Our aim is knowing who we are.
Stopping it is promoting the mind, because the mind is trying to stop
it. Exactly.
I've wasted half my life trying to...
Yes. But that's why Bhagavan says it's not stopping the mind or controlling thoughts. That's not our aim. Our aim is knowing who we are. Yeah. The only reason why thoughts are an issue is they distract our attention. In fact, they themselves are the sign of our attention distracted away from self. So we should ignore them and try to know who we are.
Yes.
That solves the problem of, if we ignore them, the problem is solved. The problem exists only because we don't ignore them.
Actually, there's you were reminded, something's popped into my mind, and that is, there's a Zen, I think he's a Zen master, I'm not sure, Wang Po.
Yes.
Wang Po, and he said, on his deathbed actually,
yes.
He said something like, "Gentlemen, remember, the perceived does not perceive."
Yes.
Is that what?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So what does
that
perceive?
runs to what the hell he was talking.
What does perceive? That's what we want to know.
Yes, but but your answer is I perceive. Yeah, I being.
That is just a word.
Right.
What is it? We have to experience it. What is the reality of that which is now experiencing all this? And no words can answer that. No thought can answer that. Only the experience can answer it.
Yes, what is it? Yes, you can't answer.
Yeah.
But it sounds like when you say I, we give I a location here. Yes. Here, right?
We need not give I a location anywhere.
But that's a mistake.
So long as the mind exists, it appears that I is here, not here. Right. So we have to turn our attention towards here, towards I. But that's all part of the fabric of this illusion called mind. But the way to pierce through this fabric is to attend to I. Attending to anything else is just sustaining the fabric. So it is.
And we don't know where that's. We don't know where that's going to lead. We have to give up.
Who doesn't know? we have to be. Because why I say that now? Because it's very easy when we talk about these things. If you observe our conversation, we keep on going off on tangents. We keep on talking about what is experience, what is... All this is irrelevant. The only thing that is relevant is I. Experiencing I here and now. That's the only thing that is required. Anything else is a distraction. The more we think about it, the more complicated it seems. But actually it's so simple. If we cease thinking about it, it would be patently obvious how simple it is.
Do we have to take your word for it? It's so simple.
No, you don't. You have to experience. My word is no use to me or to you. If we have to experience it, we have to give it. It maybe Bhagavan's teachings is just a myth. Maybe it's just part of our dream. Maybe there's nothing in it. But at least we can try. We've got nothing else worth trying. Bhagavan doesn't ask us to believe him. He asks us to try it out and see for ourselves.
If you try the other approach, which is pure love, and try to sort of dissolve the outer self, the mind and so forth, in pure love, how does that work? I mean,
what is pure love?
I.
Yeah. So it's not another thing. It is not another thing.
Right.
Doesn't everyone know this? Everybody knows it, but they just don't realise that they know it. It's not.
Yes, we are all the time. We are never not experiencing self.
Exactly.
But we are experiencing it as if it was all these things. It is not. In order to experience it as it really is, we have to turn our attention towards I and find out what is this I. Bhagavan used to say we don't have to realize the real, we just have to unrealize the unreal. So it's a matter of not of gaining anything new, but of shedding what is superfluous.
Yeah, I think I have this problem with conceptualizing, trying to concept. I need to kind of resist this tendency to conceptualize.
Yes.
This philosophy. It's not a concept. So it's not something you can't say, well, this is what the philosophy is.
It is a philosophy, it is a concept, but it's a philosophy that is pointing in a particular direction. We shouldn't get caught up in the words or the ideas of the philosophy. We should get caught up in the direction it is pointing to. If you read any part of Bhagavan's teachings, it is constantly pointing in just one direction, and that is towards us. So the whole purpose of the philosophy can never reveal the truth, but philosophy can point the way, can show us where we can find the truth, and that is within ourselves.
So this is what is the constructive philosophy, is to get rid of all the concepts one by one.
We don't have to, if you try to get rid of them one by one, that's useless, because you get rid of one and another one will come in its place. Right. So we have to get rid of we have to cut the tree from the very root.
Like an onion.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but the best analogy is cutting a tree from the root. We're not trying to cut the leaves and branches, because so long as you cut leaves and branches, they keep on sprouting. There's no end to it. You have to cut from the very root. The root is I. Cut it at the very root.
There was a certain point where you said that you needed a teacher, or you needed to be in the ashram for the amount of time, and that's why it happened to you. Which, to my mind, is an indication of that. You must be a fairly advanced soul, because obviously this opportunity. If you take somebody like Annamalai Swami, who was also an extremely advanced soul. I mean, look what he was put through in all those years that he was at the ashram.
Okay. If I tell you I have a specialist in Harley Street who is treating my disease, and he's the greatest specialist in the world, there's no other doctor in the world who is so skillful at that particular disease, what would you think of me? Oh, I'm a very special patient. Not that. My condition is so serious that I have to go to the best doctor in the world. If I just had a cold, I could go to any GP or even to a chemist. The fact that
let's keep you out of the picture.
No, it doesn't matter whether it's me or anyone else. If anyone who has special attention, it means their condition is very,
I don't think so.
Very serious.
I don't agree with
I think so.
I think somebody like Annamalai Swami.
I don't know about Annamalai Swami, but I know Sadhuam told me. The reason we come to the fact that we have come to Bhagavan is a clear sign of our ignorance, because Bhagavan would not have brought us to him if we were not exceptionally bad cases of ajnana.
So you mean we're more advanced than you because we've never actually experienced, we've never been given the fortune.
We're in the same boat. We have the same Bhagavan as our Guru. We're all.
I mean, I understand what you're trying to say, but the truth of the matter on the practical level is that, again, this is negative, but some souls are more advanced than others. I mean, there's
okay. From a relative perspective, yes. But how many souls are there?
Millions, billions.
In whose view?
Right, I mean,
That's what Bhagavan says. It's the mind that tells us there are so many other minds. But only one mind is telling us this. So let us find out the truth of that one mind, and then we can think about the other minds. In dream we see so many people, but when we wake up,
we dismiss it.
Yeah.
Because this is the same with this reality now. Is that right now we think it's so real, but then we get to sleep and we get in another world and we somehow dismiss it, this reality as well.
Yeah.
So what is?
Whatever state we're experiencing appears real at the time we're experiencing it. My father has died in this waking state, but in dream I may meet my father. When I meet him in dream, it is real. Even though I said, oh, I thought he was dead, even though the thought occurs to me, obviously he's not, because there he is in front of me. So we all have experiences like that in dream. So it's all in the mind. And so we should try to find out what is this mind that is able to experience so many things.
But that was a musical joke, wasn't it, about 50 years ago? They were always like, it's all in the mind.
Okay.
But, I mean, it's the truth.
It is the truth. It is the truth, because we never experience anything outside the realm of our mind, or the mind never experiences anything outside its own realm. But are we this mind? What is this mind? We investigate it, it disappears.
There's a sense of mind, there's a sense that the ego exists there now only because of my memories.
The ego doesn't exist. The ego seems to exist.
But the memories, they're not real. They're just stored somewhere.
The memories are the memories are as real as the ego would has them.
Exactly.
But the question is this ego real?
Yeah.
We have to investigate this ego to find out if it's real. Then the problem of whether other things are real will be solved.
Depressing of Sadhuwan to say that. It was all the bad cases we were attracted to. Well, it really mean that.
I think he really meant it, but at least we have the consolation. At least we've got the best doctor.
Bhagavan didn't say that.
What?
Bhagavan didn't say anything like that.
But Bhagavan never said he was a doctor. He didn't say he couldn't say it. There's some things Bhagavan couldn't say, but his disciples could say about him.
Like what?
What?
Like what?
Like that.
Like that. That he's the greatest of all doctors, and therefore we're the most serious cases of disease.
But I mean, the fact is,
Bhagavan isn't going to say that.
It's a huge grace to be able to spend time with Bhagavan, isn't it?
Will Bhagavan say so? We can say so, but Bhagavan wouldn't say so.
No, he wouldn't say so.
No, exactly. That's what I say. That's why I say sometimes it's quite good. It's quite nice to spend time with Bhagavan's devotees, because then we can hear about what we can. For those of us who are too thick to understand Bhagavan's greatness just by seeing him, at least we learn from the people who have been with him and understood his real greatness.
I think it's the grace of God to be a bad case person.
Yeah.
Well,
because then you deserve.
What is a bad case? I mean, you know.
Of course, it's all relative.
Everything is grace. There's nothing to do.
Is it Ramana used to say everything is perfect?
Yes. Yeah.
He said everything in every moment is pure perfection. It's just that we can't see it.
Yes.
That's right.
Perfection alone exists. And you are that.
Yeah.
There's a Shakespeare sonnet, something about something holding in perfection but a little moment. I can't remember, but it sort of encapsulates that beautifully. It is, I mean, occasionally you sort of get glimpses of that. You suddenly sort of realize, see the perfection in everything. You know, the seeming wrongs are actually right, that everything is a felix culpa, that everything is grace. You do catch it, but it doesn't last very long. It goes quite quickly.
It doesn't last long because we see everything. If we see only the one thing that really exists, then it will last.
Isn't there something about seeing everyone as yourself that also helps? Sometimes I kind of get that as a feeling.
You first have to see yourself before you can see everything else as yourself. If you see yourself, then everything else will automatically be seen as yourself.
Yeah, that's probably when it arises spontaneously.
Well, everything dissolves in I, so then everything is I.
It's a bit like the matrix movie. Everything is passing to the matrix.
Yeah, the Matrix movie was all based on the Advaita Vedanta philosophy. It's just they just use the whole philosophy. Yes. Maya, being the matrix.
Yes.
There's the 5 different types of Maya.
Yeah.
Even the phrase "you are the one."
Yes.
You are the one.
And also, there are many things like
self-realized person? How do you recognize? What are the characteristics?
There's only one self-realized person, and that is you. So first you find out your characteristics, and then you can come and tell us. Self-realized, it's the whole talk about self-realized it's self-talk of ignorance, because we are assuming the existence of others in order to talk of self-realized people. But others don't exist. The only thing that really exists is you. So realize yourself, and then you'll realize what it is, what is the characteristic of a self-realized person. In fact, there's no such thing as a self-realized person, because if self is realized, there's no such thing, there's no person. So it's really not very useful thinking about Nāṉ. The whole topic is a topic which is, we're bound to get into contradictions, and we're bound to misunderstand. Bhagavan says, for the jnani doesn't experience anything other than himself. So who can possibly understand his state? In order to naftu, Bhagavan says. So we cannot possibly understand the state of a jnani. We can just be that state.